In spite of his failure, Napoleon came back from his Egyptian campaign to cheering crowds proclaiming victory. It had been over 500 years since a European army ventured so deep into the mysterious lands of the Muslim East. The accounts and artifacts brought back to Paris sparked a potent interest in Middle Eastern history, geography, and society. Archaeologists, explorers, diplomats, and missionaries flocked to the Eastern Mediterranean in an effort to both learn from the locals and impose their own teachings. The Ottoman Empire and its subjects were for the most part welcoming to such an intervention, as they were just as curious to study their Western counterparts, lusting for their art, fashion, literature, and technology. In order to modernize their society, Muslim governments sent missions of students to Western Europe, which at the time was the global center of higher culture and learning. These students would return with their own observations regarding Western history, culture, and technology in the hopes that their success could be replicated back home. A generation of ambitious Muslim students and scholars alike pondered the question, is Islam compatible with the West? While many contributed to this new rise of Western learning, one student's account is of unique significance. The Egyptian Rifa'a al-Tahtawi's works would be amongst the most important in Islamic history, as it is from his writings that the modern Muslim identity changes forever. Born in the Egyptian town of Tahta, Rifa'a al-Tahtawi grew up right after Napoleon left his mark on Egypt. Studying to be an imam at Cairo's prestigious Al-Azhar University, Rifa'a was an excellent student who caught the attention of the school's sheikh, Hassan al-Attar, who was one of the first of the Islamic ulama to promote the need for reform. Hassan al-Attar recommended Rifa'a to be a part of a student mission to France that Muhammad Ali Pasha had initiated. In 1826, al-Tahtawi had arrived in Paris where he was to study ethics, mathematics, philosophy, and the works of French authors such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Voltaire. By the time he returned to Egypt 5 years later, he was fluent in French and the head translator of the mission. In Egypt, al-Tahtawi founded his own language school in Cairo and translated French literature on medicine, philosophy, history, and military tactics. His translations were essential in developing the administrative, military, and scientific reforms that Egypt and the rest of the Ottoman Empire was so keen on accomplishing. However, perhaps more important than his translated works was his memoir of living in Paris. Titled as The Extraction of Gold, an overview of Paris, al-Tahtawi's travelogue not only documents his personal experiences in France, but also serves as an anthropological account of the French people. Before al-Tahtawi, there were no travelogues about France in Islamic academia, as it was never really a place of vital interest until Napoleon's invasion of Egypt. In fact, his book purposely mirrors the Orientalist works of French authors who wrote about the culture and customs of his own Arab peoples. Written in the traditional Rihla travelogue genre, The Extraction of Gold contains poetic eulogies, hadith quotations, and very simple Arabic, which at the time was rare for Ottoman scholars as they would have mostly written in Turkish. More unusual is that many of the Arabic words that al-Tahtawi uses in his text are loanwords from French, such as academia for academy and opera for opera. This was of course revolutionary for Arabic literature, as the book was attempting to revive a lost literary style, all while introducing new vocabulary which continues to be used today. In his book, al-Tahtawi writes with the intention of learning from the French, as they have been able to attain the highest proficiency of 19th century philosophy and science. Being a devout and proud Muslim, he reminds the readers that it was the scholars of the Islamic world who were the precursors to the French in these advancements. Nevertheless, with those days long gone, al-Tahtawi is left to question how and why the French were able to surpass the sophistication of his people. Though a student of the French, al-Tahtawi remained arrogant in his piety as he still regarded the Franks as culturally and morally inferior infidels. He writes about the strange customs the French engage in, like sitting on chairs and eating with forks and knives. He was especially disturbed by the excessive drinking and risque burlesque shows that the French indulged themselves with, making his best effort not to fall into the temptation of sinful pleasures, or even worse, convert to Christianity. Despite their impiety, al-Tahtawi knew that these infidels had much to offer him and his precious Islamic civilization, which was in desperate need of reinvigoration. Arriving in Paris, he was fascinated by the civil engineering of the city. He writes about how the roads are paved with stone that prevents the water from absorbing into the soil. There are sewers and funnels that direct the water out of the road and back into the river Seine, which serves as the lifeline of the city. With Cairo having the mighty Nile as its Seine, al-Tahtawi believes that it can surpass Paris as the queen of cities if it were to adopt the former's techniques in civil engineering and hydraulics. But to achieve these technological feats, he understood that to be like the French, he and his fellow Muslims would have to think like the French. You see, in spite of being a predominantly Christian society, al-Tahtawi makes the observation that the French are not as stuck in their old traditional ways of thinking like the Christians of Egypt. Rather, the French are willing to go beyond the realm of what they already know, all while gathering evidence to support their understanding of the natural world and the sciences. Despite being Muslim and faithful to his religion, al-Tahtawi insists that he and his peers must adopt the secular sciences in order to truly modernize like the French. This was a radical position to take, as adopting a secular understanding of the world would ultimately undermine the divinity of the Islamic sciences. However, it was clear to al-Tahtawi that the old ways of Islamic learning were stagnating their society, and that the new secular approach to science was advancing the French state far beyond what any Muslim country could achieve. To adopt the French sciences, al-Tahtawi suggests more than just reading French literature. Instead, he argues that it is the French state and its civil organization that has allowed for such progressive thinking to take place. By examining the French civil code and its content, he highlights the significance each article has towards making French society one that fosters intellectualism. The notion that all French citizens are equal under the law and the encouragement of civilian involvement in state affairs is what allows France to harness such a vibrant thirst for knowledge. Journals and newspapers made information very accessible to the public, allowing for intellectual discussion to be prevalent in any circle of French society. The average citizen is not only literate, but has an urge to learn more, something that according to al-Tahtawi, the average Egyptian lacks. This fast-paced desire for knowledge is what al-Tahtawi observes as the main ingredient for France's academic achievements. But simple education reform was too slow a process for cultivating a vibrant intellectualism. If true reform was to take place, Egyptian society as a whole needed to change just as much as its political system. He argues that Egypt's government needed to veer away from the absolute rule of the monarch and allow civilians to more freely participate in their nation's affairs. With this participation, citizens have more ownership over the politics and policies of their country, granting them the responsibility of securing their rights for both themselves and future generations. A strong sense of citizenship that transcends religious lines would unite the people of Egypt and thus encourage the populace to seek knowledge in order to strengthen the nation. The conditioning of a new Republican Egyptian citizenship would be a long and grueling process. So in order to jumpstart this societal change, al-Tahtawi encouraged Egypt's colonialism and conquest of Sudan and the Levant as a way to revive the lost imperial glory of the pharaohs. Living in France during the July Revolution of 1830, al-Tahtawi saw firsthand how the French conquest of Algeria helped solidify the legitimacy and popularity of the new monarchy. Thus, he believed that a demonstration of Egypt's strength and militarism over others would create a sense of national pride and patriotism within the Egyptian populace. With a strong sense of national identity, Egyptians would be encouraged to sustain and expand the glory of their nation. Then, and only then, could Egypt become a modernized nation like those of Europe. Having said that, unlike the French, al-Tahtawi didn't see colonialism as a benefit to the colonized. Being part of Egypt's colonial mission in Sudan later in his career, al-Tahtawi saw that trying to make the Sudanese like modernized Egyptians was futile, as he sincerely believed that the people there were too primitive and stupid to adopt any of his ideals. Egyptian colonialism in Sudan only made the living conditions of the Sudanese worse as they heavily taxed the locals, plundered their pyramids, and increased the traffic of an already lucrative slave trade. As far as al-Tahtawi and the Egyptian state were concerned, the colonization of Sudan was purely for the pride and glory of Egypt. After his return from France, he would continue to write in the hopes of rejuvenating the greatness of his precious Egypt. He persuaded Muhammad Ali Pasha to cease the gifting of Egyptian artifacts to European nations and instead preserve them as relics of Egypt's history and identity. In 1838, al-Tahtawi would publish the History of Ancient Egypt, which would only emphasize the significance Egypt's ancient past had on its modern identity. Before this, Egyptians thought little of their ancient heritage as they never bothered to research it and allowed Europeans to keep whatever they stole from the tombs of pharaohs. Al-Tahtawi changed all that by drawing an intimate connection between Egypt's national identity and its ancient past, promoting the establishment of the country's own museums and Egyptology institutions. In truth, modern Egyptian nationalism owes its ideological foundations to the advocacy and writings of Rifa'a al-Tahtawi. However, al-Tahtawi's works have inspired far more than just Egypt. His ideal institutional and societal reforms were encouraged throughout the entirety of the Islamic world. Although a devout Muslim, he sincerely believed that the secular sciences and a republican political system did not contradict Islam. In fact, he argued that Islam was more than capable of introducing these Western concepts while remaining true to the religion, as pluralist governments and science were things Islam had promoted before. Concepts like this, the combination of Western institutions and Islamic society, would initiate an entire intellectual movement known as Islamic modernism, an ideology which would continue to inspire a vast array of different thinkers and political organizations. More importantly, the works of al-Tahtawi created the ideological basis of a modern Arab identity, one that prides itself in the glory of the Islamic Khilafahs, while distinguishing itself from others as its own separate nation. He brought forth an Arab consciousness that had never truly existed before, stating that the Arab peoples have far more in common with the French than they do with the Turks due to their propensity towards freedom. Indeed, al-Tahtawi is by all means the intellectual father of the Al-Nahda, an intellectual era that would define the modern Arab identity. But questions of what this identity entails and who it should include would continue to be pondered long after the days of Rifa'a al-Tahtawi. Thank you guys for watching. This video is the second of a series made in collaboration with the YouTuber Sultan Skinny, who wrote and researched the script. The series will aim to explore Arab intellectual thought in the modern period. Make sure you go check out his channel. As usual, a big thank you to my patrons for continuing to support the channel. Until next time, peace!